They called her a liar before the dust settled. It started with a scream cutting through the late afternoon heat, sharp enough to stop the card game outside Miller's store. By nightfall, everyone in town knew the story, at least the version they preferred. Clara Finch, the schoolteacher with ink-stained fingers and a habit of walking home alone, claimed that Caleb Horne's son had dragged her behind the abandoned barn. She said there was blood. She said there were witnesses who turned away. The town laughed softly at first. Then louder. Caleb Horne stood on the edge of the crowd, hat pulled low, hands folded like he was waiting for prayer. He was the kind of rancher people trusted without knowing why. His land fed half the town. His words settled arguments. When he didn't speak, others spoke for him. Caleb raised that boy right, they said. Clara's always been strange, they said. She wants attention, they said. Clara kept teaching until mothers pulled their children out of her class. She kept walking past the saloon even when the laughter followed her like thrown stones. She wrote letters to the county judge, careful and precise, each one unanswered. When she passed Caleb on the road, he tipped his hat and looked through her, as if she were fog. At night, Caleb sat on his porch and listened to the coyotes. His son, Thomas, slept easily inside. Sometimes Caleb would wake to the memory of a broken fence behind the barn, a scream that might have been a fox, a dress half buried near the creek. He told himself memory was a traitor. He told himself love made liars of men. Weeks later, Clara was fired. The school board said it was about community harmony. She packed her books into a single trunk and rented a room above the bakery. She stopped smiling. She stopped writing letters. She stopped speaking unless spoken to. The town felt lighter without her voice pushing back. The truth arrived quietly, the way it always does. A hired hand found Thomas drunk behind the barn one night, a girl from the next county sobbing in the hay. She wasn't a liar. She wasn't brave enough to stay. She ran before dawn, leaving behind bruises and a torn ribbon. The hired hand told Caleb. That night, Caleb didn't sleep. He sat at the table until the oil lamp burned low, staring at the knot in the wood where his wife had once spilled coffee and laughed. He thought of the weight of his silence, how easily it had settled over the town like a blessing. The next morning, Caleb went to the sheriff. By noon, the town was gathered again. This time, no one laughed. Caleb stood bareheaded in the sun and spoke his son's name with a steadiness that broke something open in his chest. He told them what he knew. He told them what he had suspected. He told them how he had chosen quiet over truth. Thomas was taken away. The ranch contracts vanished within days. Neighbors who once leaned on Caleb's fence crossed the street to avoid him. The church pew where he sat grew empty on both sides. The town needed someone to blame for the shame it had borrowed, and Caleb's silence fit neatly into their hands. Clara stood at the edge of the crowd, thinner now, eyes hollowed by waiting. Caleb met her gaze for the first time in months. He opened his mouth, then closed it. There were words that couldn't walk back across what had been done. She turned away before he could try. By winter, Caleb sold the ranch. The land passed to strangers. The house went dark. On the day he left town, the wind picked up dust from the road and carried it through the empty square where Clara's laughter used to be, where the truth had once begged for a voice. Caleb did not leave town the day he sold the ranch. That was the story people told, because it was easier to believe he vanished than to accept he stayed and learned how to be small. He rented a narrow room behind the blacksmith's shop, where the walls smelled of iron and old smoke. Each morning he woke before dawn out of habit, his body still expecting fences to mend and cattle to count. With no land to tend, he walked. He walked until the sun climbed high and his boots filled with dust, until the town that had once orbited around him became something he moved through like a ghost. People noticed him differently now. Not with respect, not with anger exactly, but with a cautious distance, as though truth were contagious and he carried it on his coat. The same men who once slapped his back nodded stiffly. The same women who had praised his son pulled their children closer when he passed. Caleb accepted it without protest. He had learned what silence could do. Clara did not leave either. The bakery room grew colder as winter set in, the single stove coughing more smoke than heat. She found work copying ledgers for the hardware store owner, her handwriting precise and impersonal. At night, she read by lamplight, though she rarely turned the page. Sleep came in short, brittle stretches, breaking apart at the slightest sound. Sometimes, when she walked home at dusk, she felt eyes on her. Not the mocking ones from before, not the openly hostile ones, but something worse, curiosity softened by guilt. People watched her the way they watched a scar heal, unsure whether to look away or stare until it made sense. She'd passed Caleb once outside the post office. They slowed at the same moment, like two animals sensing a shared danger. He opened his mouth again, as he always seemed to do, then stopped. The apology hovered between them, heavy and insufficient. "Don't," she said quietly. He nodded, relief and shame crossing his face in equal measure. She walked on, her steps steady, though her hands trembled until she reached the corner. The sheriff's office became a place no one liked to linger. Thomas Horn sat in the back cell awaiting transfer, his face swollen with disbelief more than fear. He asked for his father twice. Caleb did not come. Instead, he sent money for food, for clothes, for whatever small comforts could be bought without words. At night, Caleb dreamed of fences again, not broken ones this time, but fences he kept rebuilding as fast as they fell. Each post sank into sand. Each wire snapped when pulled tight. He woke with his jaw clenched, his palms aching as if he'd been gripping tools all night. Winter pressed down hard that year. Snow cut off the northern road, and supplies came late. The town pulled inward, families sharing food, fires, and stories. Clara was rarely invited. When she was, the invitations were stiff, as if extended out of obligation rather than desire. One evening, the bakery owner fell ill. The shop closed for days, and Clara's meals grew thin. She sold a few books. Then a coat. Pride had already been taken from her, hunger felt like a small thing by comparison. Caleb noticed the change before he knew what it meant. He saw the way her shoulders hunched deeper into herself, the way her boots wore thin at the soles. He counted his coins that night, then counted again, knowing the sum would not change. The next morning, a sack of flour and a jar of preserved meat appeared at Clara's door. No note, no name. She stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at it. Her first instinct was anger. Her second was exhaustion. She carried the sack inside, hands shaking not from cold, but from the complicated relief of being seen without being spoken to. The town murmured about it. Some said Caleb was trying to buy forgiveness. Others said it was the least he could do. No one asked Clara what she thought. She stopped caring whether they did. Spring came unevenly. Snow lingered in shadows while the fields turned to mud. Work returned in pieces, fences to mend for neighbors who no longer trusted him with larger tasks, roofs to patch, wells to clean. Caleb took whatever was offered. He charged little. He worked hard. His hands stayed busy enough to keep the memories from crowding in all at once. One afternoon, he was repairing a fence near the creek when he heard a voice behind him. "You're setting that post too shallow." He turned slowly. Clara stood a few paces away, arms crossed, her hair pulled back tight against the wind. She looked thinner, but steadier. He nodded. "Old habit. It won't hold after the first rain." "I know." She watched him for a moment longer, then surprised herself by stepping closer. She took the shovel from his hands without asking and drove it deeper into the earth, her movements efficient, practiced. When she handed it back, their fingers brushed. Neither of them moved away. "You don't have to do this," she said. "I do," he replied. "Just not for the reason people think." She studied his face, searching for something she wasn't sure she wanted to find. Whatever she saw there made her step back. "I didn't ask for your help," she said. "I know." She nodded once, sharply, then turned and walked away. The fence stood firm when the rain came. Word arrived from the county jail late in the summer. Thomas had been sentenced. The letter was brief, official, devoid of emotion. Caleb read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in his pocket. He did not drink that night. He did not pray. He sat on the steps behind the blacksmith's shop and watched the stars until dawn softened their edges. The town shifted again after that. The story lost its sharpness, became something people referenced instead of lived with. New gossip took its place. New grievances. Clara was no longer the center of every whispered conversation, though she felt the echo of it in every room she entered. She began teaching again, unofficially at first. A few families who distrusted the school board more than her sent their children to her in the evenings. She taught them to read by firelight, to write their names without fear of mistakes. Her voice grew stronger with use. Caleb heard about it from a child who asked him to fix a loose step on the way to her lessons. He nodded, said nothing, but that night he allowed himself a small, careful breath of something like hope. The past did not loosen its grip. Some nights, Clara woke convinced she was back behind the barn, the smell of hay and rot filling her lungs. Some nights, Caleb woke hearing his son's voice, young and innocent, before it had learned how to harden itself. They passed each other often. Sometimes they spoke about the weather, about work, about nothing at all. Sometimes they didn't speak. The space between them shifted, tightened, loosened, never settling into anything that could be named. One afternoon, the creek flooded after an unexpected storm. Water tore through the lower fields, carrying debris and half-rotted fence posts with it. A child slipped on the bank and was pulled under. Shouts filled the air. Caleb ran without thinking. He waded into the water, muscles screaming as the current fought him. He found the child tangled in branches, panicked but alive. When he dragged her to shore, Clara was there, kneeling in the mud, her hands already reaching. Together, they steadied the girl, spoke to her softly until the shaking stopped. For a brief moment, the town watched them not as symbols or reminders, but as two people doing what needed to be done. Afterward, they stood apart, soaked and silent. Clara wiped her hands on her skirt, leaving dark streaks of mud. "You didn't hesitate," she said. "No." She nodded slowly, as if filing the information away. "That matters." He met her eyes. "Not enough." "Maybe not," she said. "But it matters." The creek receded. Life pressed forward again, uneven and unresolved. Clara's classroom grew. Caleb's work steadied. The town learned, clumsily, how to live with the truth without fully accepting it. Some wounds closed crooked. Some stayed open. Some turned into something like scars, sensitive to pressure, aching when the weather changed. Neither Clara nor Caleb pretended otherwise. They carried what remained between them, not forgiveness, not absolution, but an understanding forged in the space where silence had once done the most damage.